Go live.
Okay, I can see that it's recording.
Oh, yep, yep.
And then I'm going to go to your page on Facebook. Because I'm going to be able to need to share it. Now, is it the national organization I need to be streaming from?
Yes. Honey, can you come here
Okay.
for a second?
Oh, dear.
How do I get Zoom back up? Okay. Sorry, y'all.
Oh, no, you're good. You're golden. Let's see here. Okay, as soon as it goes live, I'll hit the share button and put it in the groups where it's relevant.
Okay, cool.
So we'll just take a minute to do that. I'll just do that while you all are introducing yourselves. So. I feel like this top makes me look very anime. I'm into it.
Oh, I love the Evey, yeah.
I have a theme.
Yeah.
I've got
so many
possibilities. Yeah, I've got Winters and Evey. I really lean into both of those things.
Okay, we're live on Facebook, y'all.
Oh, wonderful. All right, let me just refresh and then we can get started, okay? I have a little bit of a lead time here. I can see that it is streaming. Okay, so let me just introduce the panel, I think, really quickly. And also talk about the Trans Empowerment Project, and then we can introduce everybody who's on the panel. Does that sound okay with everyone?
Yep, that's good.
All right. So tonight's panel is about allyship and siblings. Specifically, we're sharing stories, answering some questions, and having conversations about what allyship from our siblings looks like. Sibling relationships are very special inside of any family, right? And in some cases, even more important to us than maybe even our relationships with our parents. So I'm really hoping we're going to have a great talk about our histories with our siblings and how they came to be supportive of us, if that took a little work, or if they kind of fell directly into the role with ease. All right, and just so everyone knows, the panel tonight is hosted and provided for by the Trans Empowerment Project, which is a national nonprofit founded and led by people of color. And they handle just a ton of different advocacy work, inmate advocacy, clothing swaps, help for allied loved ones, bail funds, rental assistance, like all of that. It's just a wonderful, wonderful organization run by trans people of color. Love them to death. I've been in a relationship with them for a little bit now, and it's really cool to get to do this project with them. Okay, so let's just kind of go around. Claudia, would you like to maybe start us off?
Yes,
just introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So, my name's Claudia. I'm currently living in Kanagawa in Japan at the moment. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm originally from the UK, and I've been living in Japan with my partner for about 4 years. 4 years now. In terms of my transition story, which I'll go into a bit later with my sister, I have one older sister who's 4 years older than me, and when I transitioned, it was around 15 years ago now. So it might be. It might be an interesting context, I think, because in terms of, obviously in terms of just general history, 15 years isn't that long a time, but I think in terms of the history of trans conversation, quite different. So it'll be interesting to see any kind of differences or similarities to more recent transition stories. So yeah, that's me.
All right. Lily, would you like to tell us who you are?
Sure. Well, my name's Lily. Some of y'all might know me from Instagram as Lily, a girl. And first of all, I wanted to say thanks so much for having me on. This is my first time doing something like this. Um, I have two sisters, actually. One, we're a little bit out of contact just due to the way things were processed in my family after I came out.
Sure.
But my closest sister, both in age and emotion, Liz has been super supportive, and that's actually who's my story is about today. She's been a great help in my life, especially recently.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm Evey Winters. I'll be hosting and moderating this panel tonight and guiding the conversation, which I hope is going to be a very fluid and natural conversation um, with us just like casually having a conversation and being able to talk with each other about this really important part of our lives. I'm one of the administrators at a Facebook group called Sounds Like You Need to Be Educated on Transgender Individuals, but okay, which educates about 43,000 people right now as our current membership. I also help to admin several other groups related to support for trans people, creating authentic trans characters in literature, supporting our family when they come out. And gosh, what am I not doing? So, all right. Gosh, I'm going to keep doing that all night. I think just to start us off, what we'll do is we'll just kind of like rotate round robin style a little bit, and we'll talk about maybe our family situation. I think establishing a history and a context will help make what we're saying about our siblings more valuable. Would it be helpful for you all if I started, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I actually grew up in rural West Virginia. I don't really say where I'm from in West Virginia, but I'm towards the center of the state. Clarksburg and Morgantown were not terribly far from me. I was born in '88. And then, so, I'm growing up in West Virginia through the 90s. I am the eldest of 6 children because Italian American families, right? So I have lots of siblings and some that I speak with more than others since I came out. But I'm sure you all know West Virginia is not a terribly progressive state in terms of votership. Last election, I think it was overwhelmingly Trump territory. So a lot of conservative values, very rural. We have a couple of major cities that are the size of a smaller city elsewhere. So not a terribly progressive state, not a terribly great place to be growing up if you're LGBTQ plus in any form. My town had about 3,000 people on a good day, I think, when I was a kid. We got a lot of we were a nexus town, so we did get a lot of people through our town. So we tended to be a little more cosmopolitan than other towns in the state. So that was probably really good for me. In terms of my siblings, like I said, I have 6 of them. 2 of them I don't really get to speak to anymore, unfortunately. The third is kind of aloof. We still talk sometimes, but I am the eldest. And I have 2 other siblings that I'm still very close with, and we talk regularly. And I'll be mostly focusing on them tonight. All right. Claudia, would you like to tell us maybe about the context of your relationship with your sibling?
Yeah, sure. So let's start with my background. So obviously I'm currently living in Japan at the moment, but I grew up in the UK in London. So I was born very close to you. So I was born in 1987. So a similar type of era. I think the main thing I kind of found growing up was there was very little conversation around sort of trans or transition or trans people in general.
Oh, sure.
And I kind of felt like at the time it felt like something that was like illegal, or something that wasn't something that was that normal, quote unquote normal people did. So,
Mm-hmm.
I remember seeing one documentary, called the kind of Sex Change Hospital, some kind of very sensationalistic type of a documentary
Mm-hmm.
about kind of real underground world where certain trans people would be, but they wouldn't live any kind of normal life. That was kind of image I
Sure.
had of fans growing up. And I grew up with one sister who was 4 years, or who is 4 years older than me. My parents were divorced, so I mainly grew up with my mother, but I saw my dad at the weekends most weekends. So he was still very much a part of our life, but at the same time, I think the divorce did affect both of us
Sure.
to a significant extent. It was, I think for me, I don't remember the divorce so well because I was 4 years old, but I just remember the feeling of my dad not being there anymore where he wasn't before. I think it probably affects my sister more profoundly because she was 8 years old, so she remembered more of the conflict and more of the reason for the divorce at the time. So I think, the divorce element probably was a sort of significant aspect of that kind of overrode my childhood. But and I think because of that, I think my sister was the only one who, I guess, understood that feeling exactly and in the exact context of our family. So I think we were always very united in that aspect. And I remember
Sure.
specifically when we'd visit our dad at the weekend and then go back to our mum's for the week to start school again. Obviously, it's kind of Sunday blues, but I think we always felt very sad having to leave our dad again. And I thought it was only me that felt like that. And it was only years later I found out that my sister felt exactly the same way as well. So I think we've often experienced emotionally very similar journeys in some respects. And she's been very supportive as well throughout the transition. And has also been quite a good ally during the times where my parents initially weren't as supportive or weren't as understanding. They are now, but they weren't at the beginning. So having my sister as a part of the family unit that was supportive, I think helped to some degree my parents come around as well. So yeah, I'll be talking about that I guess a bit later as well. Yeah, so that's the background there.
Okay. And Lily, maybe you could give us some kind of context for your relationship with your siblings.
Yeah, I would say more specifically with my closest sister, Liz. As kids, we were really, really close. We'd always, play with Legos instead of doing our homework, bond over stuff like that. But then unfortunately, kind of like Claudia, we had similar experiences handling some trauma in the home. We both ended up getting kicked out of the home for different reasons. And it was nice once we reconnected to kind of have that bond of similar experiences and also kind of recreating our childhood bond. Thankfully, I'm from a little bit of a bigger city, Charlotte, North Carolina, slightly bigger than yours, Evey's. Yeah, I love it here.
How many people are there?
I think population's almost 1 million, so a
I knew
couple
it was
more than
big, but I
yours.
didn't know it was that big. Yeah, just a little bit bigger.
Right.
You probably got internet and everything.
Really good internet too. Well, and I lived a little bit out of the city as a kid, kind of in a more conservative area of town. We would always go to church, and our parents were very kind of stereotypical, sort of radioactive reaction to their child coming out as trans, like you'd expect. So it was interesting actually discovering myself in an environment where I didn't even know trans was a thing. Kind of like Claudia, it was almost like something that I thought was illegal. But then, right. And then I ended up going to public school, and I actually made friends with a very nice lesbian there. And I kind of knew it might be in relation to something like that. So I talked to her and I kind of came out to her without knowing. And she basically explained what I was feeling, and then I did research and I understood it. But then being in such a big city now has really helped out because there's a ton of resources here that really helped me through my hard time of coming out and then kind of figuring myself out both as a woman and like as an adult.
Sure. Okay, are you done?
Yes, for now. Go
Okay,
ahead.
we hit a quiet spot. I just wanted to make sure you were finished talking and not like just taking a breath. All right. Yeah, so a thing that I'm hearing from both of you is that it sounds like you came out at very different points in your life. Um, let's talk about coming out. Let's start there. Um, because I think we can sort of like talk through our realizations of being trans in that context. But I think if we start the story with coming out, that will help us go back and see those realizations maybe in a different light, or a more thorough context, right? So, how old were you all when you came out?
So for me,
Anyone could speak.
for me, I was 18. So
Oh,
yeah, 17
cool.
and 18 when actually came out. Yeah.
And
Yeah, for me, I was, I think it was 16. I might have
oh my
just turned
gosh.
17, but around then. So it was definitely, it wasn't too long ago though. So.
Wow, y'all are just really crushing it on coming out early. I came out when I was 31.
Mm.
So, um, yeah, oh gosh. Wow, I'm starting to like feel a little old here.
Never too late to come out.
It's never too late to come out. If you are watching this and you are like a closeted trans person, first of all, we see you, but it is also never too late.
Yeah, I've
Promise.
seen somebody come out at 80, so and be very happy.
Okay, so let's just, I guess I should probably give a little context for my coming out was, God, I was, like I said, I was not in a safe place for me to transition. I'm not from a major city. Where I grew up, if you were gay or thought to be gay, that wasn't good. Hold on, I need to put a pause on for just a second. To the trans empowerment team who are running this, I hope you can hear me. Can you please set the view to gallery so that people can see all of us at one time? Is that a thing you could do?
Yep.
Thank you so much. I just noticed on the stream here that it's just going one at a time. All right, back to it. Sorry. I grew up in this town. I didn't have access to a lot of resources or a lot of information at all. I first learned about trans folks when I was like 13, and it wasn't like a good moment, right? So I had to move away before I felt comfortable coming out to anybody. I've moved to Maryland. I'm in Maryland. And I lived in Maryland for a year before I started coming out to people. I did a spreadsheet because I'm a Virgo, and my spreadsheet was like in order of who scared me the most, who could influence me the most, and who I was most worried about. So like I had these like 3 scales of like, do I worry about this person having a bad reaction? Can this person hurt me with a bad reaction? And like, how close are they to me? How much influence do they have over my life? Like if this person tried to talk me out of it, would they have an effect on me? And so my family, I came out to last. I came out to my siblings just a couple of weeks, maybe a month before my birthday, when they were going to travel up to see me. And like I already was like, I had breasts. Like I had lost 63 pounds. Like there was no way they weren't going to put it together. So that was actually a really interesting conversation with them. I got the old, yeah, we know, from 2 of them, Carla and Vincent. And my sister decided to affirm my womanhood by being like, welcome to the fold, bitch. So that was how I started off with family. How did coming out to your siblings go for you, Lily?
One of them was kind of hurtful, to be honest, and that's one of the reasons we haven't been very close in a while. My eldest sister, I had initially, due to me coming out, was kind of the tipping point. There were some other factors, disagreements between me and my parents.
Sure.
So after the point that I had been kicked out, I was kind of couch hopping, and I have this very distinct memory of, like, really traumatic memory of my eldest sister coming to me to like visit me at someone else's house in tears, saying like, please don't do this. And that was probably the most hurtful thing she could have done.
Mm,
Um, uh, Thankfully, my other sister Liz was very supportive. Initially, I actually told her over text just due to the situation we were in. And
mhm.
initially, she pretty much immediately was like, I don't quite understand it. It's definitely going to take me a little bit of time to get used to it. But like, you're still my sibling. I still love you. That's your business.
Sure. Yeah.
Which I think was a very fair, because obviously it is somewhat, at least oftentimes, unexpected news.
Yeah, big
Um,
change.
right. But it was definitely
Mhm.
the support I needed to be like, I'm not sure how to react to this, but I still love you nonetheless.
Mhm.
Thankfully, very quickly, she got used to using my preferred name and pronouns. And like I mentioned, has really, really helped me out since then.
Mhm. And what about you, Claudia?
Yeah, so this was back in 2006. I think the first thing, the kind of first step I sort of took was, I think I just Googled something along the lines of just like, I can't be a boy anymore, or something like that. I just
Hmm.
kind of like, I had no word, like proper words to articulate, being trans or transitioning or anything. I just put what I felt, because it was
Sure.
something that was so overwhelming, and something that had been, like, I guess for many of us, it's something that kind of underlines your whole like life narrative. And I think it was then I came across a kind of message board, as was very common back then, about trans people, and I started sort of communicating with people on there. And I
Mhm.
think that was the first time I kind of felt like this was something that was realistic. It was something that, people that I knew were doing. Um, and that's what
Yeah.
got me started on the journey, and actually helped me find out how to actually start, what you actually did.
Yeah.
And the path in the UK is normally you go to your kind of like GP or family doctor. And so I think maybe similar to you, Evie, in terms of sort of taking it into your own hands. I think in your case, if you moved away to a larger town. For me, because I lived in London, I was already in probably, well, the largest town in the UK. But
Right.
I think there's still the kind of sort of taking things into my own hands kind of element, in terms of going to the GP without anyone knowing, and then sort of buying female clothes and going out as female without anyone knowing, in secret. I'd leave at like 6 a.m. in the morning before everyone woke up, and sort of go out and do certain things, like I meet certain trans friends I knew as myself. And I
Mhm.
think it was quite exciting at that time, because I was 18. It was the first time I'd really had independence, in general. And so I think it's interesting how my transition was very much tied with me gaining my own independence and autonomy as well. Um,
Sure.
then it was, I think the point of coming out, it was almost like, it happened without me completely in control of it, because what happened was, I think I'd had some female clothes, which I'd been using to go out at the time, but I'd forgotten to kind of hide it away in my sort of normal hiding place, my bedroom. And I remember it kind of all came together at once, where my family doctor called my home,
Oh
and my mum,
no.
and it's like, with landlines, like I didn't have a mobile back then.
Mhm.
My mum was really concerned, because she was like, well, she called me saying, like, why is the doctor calling? Like, due to patient
Mhm.
confidentiality, they couldn't say what it was, but she was very worried, because normally in that situation, if a doctor calls home, it's something quite serious. And so she was thinking, are you
Yeah.
ill? Is something gone wrong? Like, what's happening? And so I thought, I was with my friend at the time, and I thought, okay, this is the time, like, I might as well tell her. Um, and so I came back with one of my friends at the time. Um,
Sure.
and I thought she might be okay with it. I thought she'd be shocked, but she'd be okay with it. But she was very angry, because I realised that I'd actually left one of my dresses on the bed. And so she had gone in there, and she hadn't told me when she was on the phone with me. But when I got back, I told her, and then she said, "Get that dress out of my house now." She was so angry, so livid. And obviously, I think it must have been a shock, because she had, I guess, no idea, or didn't want to think it was the truth. And so, she's supportive now, but during the first few years, it was quite difficult. And
Mhm.
but when I told my sister, I think she was fine with it straight away. She didn't fully understand it, but I think I guess there's one piece of advice for siblings who maybe wonder how they can support. I think the best thing to have is, as long as you have the intention to learn and the intention to support, and thinking, even if I don't get it, like, I just want to be there for you. I think that is just, that's something anyone can do, and is the easiest thing to do. And I think that's what my sister did. So, in terms of understanding, she didn't quite have the understanding to begin with. Because she kind of thought, that I was a gay male, and gay men tend to want to be women or want to dress up as women. And I was thinking, no, it's not about being gay. It's nothing to do with that. And so it took a while to kind of educate. And I think the only way I kind of was able to educate in the end was through my actual transition. I think when I actually did change, when I started taking hormones, growing my hair, changing legal documents, it was like, oh, right, this is not just being sexuality. It's actually is about your whole self.
Right.
And I think, once she had that understanding, I think, and the fact that I think it helped my parents see, because, particularly my mum, because I think once she saw, like, me and my sister going out, as sisters now, it kind of made me a bit silly, I think, thinking, oh, well, I'm the only one who's, like, not,
sure,
not involved with this. And I think, that was possibly, I guess, that was part of the turning point of helping her come around as well. And I think that's, like I mentioned, how siblings can be a very precious kind of relationship. I think that can be sometimes, if you have support in the family unit from the siblings, then that can help with the parents as well, definitely, if they're not on board with it. I think parents don't find more difficult.
I think that really dovetails nicely into maybe what would make a really good, like, first topic. Let's talk about education amongst our siblings. I mean, I can start if you all like, but I think it would be good for us to just talk about, like, we have supportive siblings. They started somewhere. How informed would you say they were when you came out to them, or when they found out, one way or the other? And how did that manifest? Lily, I think you touched on that a little earlier, so maybe you can just expand on that.
Yeah, I think one thing I didn't mention is when I actually initially told my sister Liz, she was like, I thought that might be what it was. And she had some clues, because similar to Claudia, part of my kind of journey of self-discovery, especially as a young kid, I would, steal my sister's clothes from her closet and try them on. And it was purely a like confidence thing. It was purely also, I thought they were fashionable. I liked her dresses.
Well, sure.
And so it was, and our parents had discovered and had a very adverse reaction to it. And I think my sister was kind of confused as to what was going on, but obviously annoyed at the very least that her clothes are being stolen, which kind of gave her hints. And I think she was also, especially after leaving the home, got more involved in the LGBT community and got more familiar with it and more aware. Not quite in depth, but at least enough to recognize what being transgender is. And I think that's what helped her notice it quickly and accept it quicker. Because I think what I'm noticing amongst you two, as well as a lot of trans people I've met, is whether siblings or other people, a lot of times the person who's actually coming out doesn't really know what's going on, and they have to do research. And I think part of it is just the awareness of what being transgender means, and how to identify it in yourself as well, because that might help people find out sooner.
Yeah, I mean, where I grew up, it was really common. Once I discovered that I could be transgender, once I discovered that transgender women existed, and also that they weren't born that way, which was my first assumption. I was like, oh, these women are like this when, they're born this way. They grow, like, they go through puberty and they have bodies like this. That was not true. But one of the first things that I kind of came to is like, oh, it's a kink. or like a sex thing. And it's funny, my dad actually reinforced that when I came out to him. He was like, "Why don't you just be gay?" I was like, "Well, I mean, I am also gay, but like we'll get to that."
That's unrelated.
Not the way you think.
Yeah, well, one thing at a time. Um, but it's funny. I found two very different levels of education between my siblings. Um, and they had a little bit of lead time to kind of do some homework. But my little brother was like immediately in like a wholesome kind of way, very supportive. Called me sister just immediately. Started using my name. It wasn't even a problem. Um, but made it very clear he didn't really understand what was going on, but that he knew how to be supportive. Whereas my sister Carla um, demonstrated some knowledge and a willingness to learn more very quickly, because she went from like making Apache helicopter jokes to yeah, like the last Christmas beforehand, she was making jokes about Apache helicopters, and then I come out to her 8 months later, and she's totally on board. So in that 8 months, I think she did a lot of homework. Um, Claudia, how about you?
Yeah, so I think, like I mentioned, and also like you and Lilia mentioned as well, I think there's definitely that kind of like equating it to being gay. And I think
Mm-hmm.
also interesting with my sister, she was quite a tomboy. So I remember her growing up thinking, oh, girly stuff. She hated like dolls and typically,
Yeah,
girly pink stuff. Like so I think I guess she tried to relate it to that. I think she I guess what a lot of people might try and do is if they have their kind of own gender non-conforming experiences, they might try and relate that experience to being trans and thinking
sure.
like the same thing. Um, and so I think, cause I remember I think she said, oh yeah, we're definitely like twins because, I felt the same way as well. But then I
Mm-hmm.
think when I explained it to her, like, that it's something that's different to just gender behavior or to do with like who you like in terms of sexuality, then I think over time she came to understand how it was different and more fundamental to like my own identity. And I remember
Sure.
it was one time where I had to kind of reinforce the fact saying it's not that I want to be a girl, it's that I am a girl. But I remember at the time I looked completely like
Yeah, yeah.
male, and it was really hard for me to say because it was like, isn't this going to look so bad, like saying that I am a girl, but then looking just completely like a guy? But I mean, but I remember she kind of took it and understood it, and so that was really a kind of relief for me
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I thought a lot of people might just say, but no, you're a guy though, like look at you, sort of thing. Like I could, that's the
Mm-hmm.
reaction that a lot of people may have if you're saying that, especially if you look a certain way. Um,
Right, right.
but she kind of took that on board, and from then, I think because our relationship had always been, it didn't actually change that much actually, because I think like she'd always seen me as sort of feminine behaving. And I remember like one kind of affirming thing she was saying was like, she never kind of saw me as like particularly like a guy anyway. Like she kind of saw me as quote unquote brother, but like not really as a guy sort of thing. And that's quite nice, sort of, quite nice to hear. And so I think actually our relationship dynamic didn't change hugely, but it just became closer, I guess, and more open. And obviously
Mm-hmm.
we're able to kind of share certain things. And it's quite interesting how now she'll be more sort of open about things that are maybe particular to do with gender in terms of relationships, for example, or even when she's sort of not feeling great on a period. I think sometimes she says, oh, she forgets I don't get periods and things like that. And so she'll tell me about it, but then like think, oh no, I don't get that. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, and I think yeah, once he was on board with that, then I think I'd say the kind of over time span, it was around about sort of 2 or 3 years. And then after that, I think it came to a point where she kind of forgot what I was like before.
Right, right.
That's the kind of situation in now. Like, I think like if I haven't asked her, but if I was asked me now, like do you remember like how it was or like whatever, I think she'll probably possibly struggle to remember. Sometimes even I kind of like I have issues remembering sometimes unless I kind of really think about it. And obviously, but it's obviously not something I would want to think about too much. um,
Right, right.
yeah, and one thing, maybe I'll leave it to later, but like when it came to my surgery, she was very supportive there. But maybe I'll leave that for a later part of the discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, just to be clear, we kind of have this slot for an hour. We can run a little long, but I know some of you have places to be. And I would like to get more into the like proactive, practical, logistical kind of questions about siblings and sibling relationships in particular. And so I think where I would like to start is I know it's so hard when you have a supportive and kind of like loving relationship with a sibling to pick out one thing that they did or continue to do, one thing that they do, one thing they said, one thing they did, that one moment where they went from being like a question mark in your life to being just like unconditionally like, this person sees me. And I think I would like to hear maybe what that moment is for you all. Lily, would you like to start for us?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Well, there's one that especially stands out to me. It was soon after I came out. Like I mentioned, we had both been, me and my sister had been kicked out of the home. And I was couch hopping for a little bit, but then she, very soon after I came out, she graciously like let me under her wing and gave me a little like slice of her small apartment, which is really what I needed there, just to feel like I was at home, to feel safe with someone I loved. And soon after I had moved in with her, my 18th birthday was rolling around, and she wanted to make it feel special, not only obviously because it's the 18th birthday, wanting to make it feel special, but also right, because I had just came out and was kind of slowly getting into this and accepting even myself in this new identity. So she had taken me to a fancy dinner at the restaurant she worked at, and she took me out on a shopping spree at the mall, which initially just felt like a really nice gesture. But I think over time I've realized it meant a lot more to me, because not only was it nice to, you know, get some more feminine items of my own to really fill out my closet, but it was a really like almost stereotypical like sisterly bonding time, kind of like Claudia mentioned, right? Kind of like Claudia mentioned, just to go out like as sisters. And I think that really helped me seep into my identity more, as well as bond with her. And like Claudia mentioned, she actually, well, when I was actually born, my sister was mad at my parents because she wanted a baby sister. And then after all these years, she finally got what she wanted. So it was nice. She's really treated it like that. Like it was almost like a pleasure that she finally had this baby sister that she wanted. And
I love that.
she's also been a, you mentioned that sometimes our siblings might help us reconnect with our parents. Well, that hasn't happened quite as much. She's definitely helped me reconnect with my family members better, like extended family, talking to them when I haven't in a while.
Sure.
And really, ever since that time, I knew that she was going to be a great support in my life.
I think I just want to pop in an anecdote because, like, I just want to like get mine. I have two wonderful siblings who are very, very. Gosh, I said I was going to keep doing it, and I did it. Two like very wonderful siblings. I mean, I'm the oldest of six, but these two are still very close to me. And oh goodness, who is? Sorry, someone was trying to call me, and it rings through on my computer. Anyway, my sister, you were talking about reconnecting with parents. My dad was like very hesitant to accept my identity, use my name, especially my name. I think that part was the hard part, because I changed my first and last name, and I think there was a little bit of an insult there. But my sister was for the holidays, was downstairs and was talking to my father and my stepmother, and my stepmother misgendered me and was like, "Why do you keep calling him her?" Right. And so this is like that one moment that really crystallized this for me, where she like put her foot down. She's like, "You're my mother, and I can't change that, but I can change if you're in my life or not. So, like either you're going to refer to her properly or I'm leaving." And I was like, all right then. Like that made it crystal clear, I think, for everybody, including me. Um, like, wow, what like that's a powerful gesture for a sibling who's not you to assert that way, right? That kind of changes the dynamic. Claudia, what about you? If you had to narrow it down to like one thing from a sibling.
I think it was interesting. It's actually a kind of a lack of reaction at certain things. I think because basically with my transition, it was quite sudden in terms of appearance. So I hadn't grown my hair. I had very short hair. I wore kind of neutral to kind of boyish clothes. So when I transitioned, I kind of I initially used sort of breast forms and started wearing female clothes and used a wig to have the longer hair and wore sort of makeup to make my face look how I thought would look better.
Sure.
Well, it was quite, I guess, a dramatic change, I guess, especially the hair. And so I remember when I came out of university, obviously, everyone was very supportive there, but obviously people, reacted, some were surprised or whatever. Obviously, you could see visually that people were surprised, or like they were obviously trying not to, I guess making an effort, trying not to sort of seem awkward or anything like that.
Sure.
But then maybe it kind of felt a little bit more awkward. But I remember when I met my sister at the, it was at London Bridge, actually, I remember, in the Underground station. And when we first met, it just felt like, okay, we're meeting up and we're just going out and having a day out. There wasn't any kind of reaction or kind of even in her eyes when she first looked at me. It wasn't a kind of, oh, this is a bit weird. Like, there wasn't any of that. I think that kind of lack of reaction, I think, was really affirming for me. And another, I think on that same day as well, I remember we both went to the toilet, and obviously this time, instead of me going to the men's, we both went into the women's toilets.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything about, oh, hang on, are you meant to be going in here? Oh, this is a bit weird, and I've done this. It wasn't any of that. It just went, and it was just a normal thing. And I think just the kind of the ordinariness of it and the lack of reaction was actually really affirming for me, and that's what sticks in my mind. I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's like a thing that, I work in the trans EDU group. I mean, it's basically a full-time job. And one of the things I'm always telling people is like, just pretend we're obvious. And like, if you just treat us as obvious, as like, of course you should be in this bathroom. Of course we're going to go jean shopping. Of course, like you're my sister. We're going to go do the thing. That can be so much more powerful than any like grand, huge gesture. Because I mean, it really does change the root of everything. Because like, I mean, and I don't know about you two, and maybe you can tell me if you feel this as well, but I definitely feel it when somebody is performing towards me a certain sort of acceptance, versus when it's like, no, you're my sister, duh. Yeah. Like, you were talking about that shopping trip. My sister came over to my house, maybe a month or two after I came out, and she was like, "I'm doing your makeup, I'm doing your hair. We're having a girls' night," and that was the best thing. But she straightened my hair, which my hair had never been straightened before. I don't know if I would do it again, but like, it was a whole thing. Like, we sat there, we talked about like boys and life, and it was just normal. Is so powerful. I think people focus too much on like a performance of allyship and be like, oh, I've got to be supportive, when really, if you just give us that normalcy, that will make such a huge difference in our lives.
I 100% agree with that. I actually had that in my notes for this. I've had several times. Thankfully, my sister Liz hasn't really done it. She initially would introduce me as, oh, this is my sister, she's trans. And it didn't bother me too much, but it definitely, I'd say over time, wasn't the best way to support me. But then she very quickly began just being like, oh, this is my sister Lily. And it was kind of at a point where you could connect the dots, especially, like I said, I'm gracious enough to live in a big city where people are kind of familiar with trans people a lot more. But
Mm-hmm.
outside of siblings, I've had like coworkers and neighbors when I introduce myself almost give like a speech like, oh, I go to Pride, like we accept you. And that's definitely not what we need.
Mm-mm. Um, Gosh, yeah, like especially, I do love when Carla, my sister, or my brother, even when they go to introduce me to somebody, it'll be like, oh, this is my sister Evie. She does this, and like, I mean, I'm passing now, so that really isn't necessary anymore. But when it was necessary, it made all the difference in the world.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Hmm. Let's see here. I'm noticing we're just like starting to run up to the wire, so I'm like trying to prioritize. Let's see here. I've got my list of things and I want to make sure I'm using it. Also, if you're watching this right now, I do have all of the areas I'm streaming this open on my computer. And if you would like to ask a question of the people in this panel, you are more than welcome to ask. And towards the end, I'll take a couple if you have them, okay? As long as that's okay with you both.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It's fine with me.
Okay. I realize I volunteered you for that when sorry. Yeah, so as we're getting into the final 10 minutes here, final 10, 15 minutes, oh, this is so hard. I have such a good list of stuff. We did the one thing. Let's talk about I want to do two things. I want to talk about our stumbling blocks. I want to talk about maybe where things went wrong and how a recovery happened there. Because everybody who tries to be an ally to us, whether they're a sibling or a family member, they inevitably make some mistakes and cause some harm because they're learning with us, right? So I think I would like to do like what happened there, what sort of went wrong, and how did you recover from that? Or how did your relationship recover from that? And then I think I'd like for us to end off on if you're going to give advice to the cisgender siblings watching this, they've got a trans or metagender sibling, what would you say to them? So I think those are going to be our final two things because the way we're going, that's all we're going to have time for. Claudia, would you like to start off? Like, what is like something that maybe went wrong with your siblings?
Yeah, so I think something that took a little time, even though there was acceptance straight away, I think with my sister, I think it was definitely the pronouns and referring to me as a sister. So I think that took a while, and I think it's kind of a bit upsetting because in the sense it felt like even though they're accepting, the fact that they hadn't changed that kind of made me think, or maybe they haven't really taken on board what it really is. And thinking that maybe it's with, like, I just like to like dress or present this way, but I'm not really
Sure.
anything more than that. And so I think, like as I mentioned before, like in terms of being supportive is the most important thing, even if you don't get it. But I think definitely acknowledging the concepts is definitely a very significant part of it as well, even if you don't know the whole kind of story or the ins and outs of it. I think like the simple thing, say like you mentioned, like saying she in front of other people, and calling you sister. I think that's what can be really affirming. And I think, I guess the way it kind of worked out to some degree was, I think more than me kind of sort of educating about it. I think obviously I did the education part of it as well, but I think also it was just over time, I think the relationship as sisters kind of grew. And I think from that, she kind of got the understanding of it just from being together and thinking, oh, this is what it is now, like it's a she, Claudia's a she's my sister now.
Right.
And I think I remember it's like a little thing, but one thing I remember is when on Facebook when you can register somebody as your family member, and I got an
Sure.
invitation saying my sister's name, would like to register you as her sister, and that was the first time that I definitely got the kind of unambiguous confirmation that that's how she recognized me, and that was a very affirming kind of moment.
Right.
And the fact that that's shown to other people in the wider world as well. And I think once
Yeah.
that once that kind of understanding had been kind of established, that's what really, after that, everything was just, good. Yeah.
Yeah. Lily, how about you?
I think the first point, I don't think I've had any major stumbling blocks, at least not ones that I've been able to overcome. Obviously, the ones I've mentioned with my parents. But
Sure.
I think to the point of having advice for cisgender siblings, I think the main one is ask questions. When I initially came out, after my sister got kind of more familiar with it, she would, if she wasn't sure about something, or before I was completely out, especially, you don't want to unintentionally out someone by referring to them as she or he, respectively, in
Right.
front of people they're not out to. So I think part of it is, if you're not sure, if you're not 100% sure in terms of outing them to people, definitely just ask. And then when it comes to questions like, hey, how can I better support you? Does this bother you? Would you want to do this? Just ask. They're your sibling. They
Yeah.
know it's out of care and love. And you're close enough that that's not like inappropriate. Like if a coworker would ask a personal question, something like that.
Yeah. Let's see here. If I were going to hand out some advice, I really love what you both are saying about, again, that normalcy, um, and about asking questions and learning when and where to signal. I think my advice is that a lot of people find out their sibling, and I hear this a lot, I hear this over and over again. They find out their sibling is transgender. And that identity, that transness, tends to take front and center in the conversation. It tends to be like, I don't understand trans stuff, right? Um, where I think if I were going to give a recommendation to a sibling, you can learn all about the trans stuff. You can get to that when you get to it. The first thing is to start with your new sibling, your new sister or brother, and affirming them in that gender, and just like being there and seeing them in their gender. Because like you're never going to go wrong treating a trans woman as a woman. You're never going to go wrong treating your trans brother as a brother. And you're never going to go wrong with a non-binary sibling of being like, how do you want me to do this? Right? Because there's not good guidelines, but that's where asking questions comes in. Like, all right, what feels good to you? Right? That's the thing I want to do. But yeah, so like if you start with gender first and then work your way back to identity of like transness, um, that makes it a lot safer to have conversations about trans identities, because it doesn't feel like your womanhood is wrapped up in sort of a negotiation around your trans identity, or built on it, right? Like I'm a woman who happens to be trans, and I'm going to discuss trans stuff, but my validity in my womanhood does not come from the fact I'm trans, right? So that's my biggest recommendation to any siblings who are watching this, which is just like, start with gender and then move to the trans identity, because there is stuff you want to know. You do want to understand trans culture. I think one thing, and maybe you two have had different experiences, um, there's an awful lot of like found family in being a trans person. Even in my case, like I'm very blessed to have a relatively like supportive family, for the parts that I'm still around. Um, but like the found family aspect is very important. And in some ways, it feels like we have to re-find our siblings when we come out to them. Has that been sort of your experience there? Anyone can talk.
A little bit. You mean like kind of refine our relationship with them, or
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
because I think you worded very, very nicely the point of identify them as your sister or your brother before
Mm-hmm.
you kind of wrap up their identity and their transhood. Because I think that's really important to support them. And I also think understanding that it's sometimes people kind of misconstrued it as almost like I'm losing a sibling, or like I lost a brother and I gained a sister. And it's
Yes.
really Same person, same personality. They just realize that they're a woman, or they realize that they're a man or non-binary. And that shouldn't, obviously that will change your relationship with them slightly, just because of what that entails. But it shouldn't change your relationship completely or restart it in any way.
Claudia, how about you?
Yeah, so I think I can only speak for myself and people similar to me that I know, but I think one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that it's something that starts from very early. It's something that's always there. Is because I think from what other people see and what they kind of perceive it is that it's something that happens when you transition. Like that's the kind of point, but that's when you become trans, or sort of that's when you become that gender. And actually, a lot of people kind of think the hardest bit is coming out and doing the kind of transition. And the very common thing that I'm sure a lot of us have been told is we're so brave and things like that, but for me it's like it was survival. It wasn't anything. It's almost like if I'm falling off a cliff and grab on something, I'm not brave for doing that. I'm just trying to survive. And it was kind of, for me, the really important idea to communicate was that it's something that's always been with me. And actually, well, for me personally, the hardest was just growing up not having my identity affirmed. And it's something that's always been there. And so, like earlier you mentioned, it's not like kind of like losing, brother or sister and gaining a sister or brother, whichever way around it is that the person was always this person, but just wasn't able to manifest it. And I think there's that, and then there's, I guess related to that is that for me, it's always been a question of my gender itself. My identity itself is not to do with gender behaviors or stereotypes, or the fact that I like certain things and don't like certain things, or whatever. It's to do with your own gender, and I think for me, I guess it was a bit easier for me in a sense because I guess I kind of fit into the binary, I guess, reasonably well, and I also in terms of my sexuality, I consider myself straight, so it makes it easier in the sense of like it kind of I think people can understand why I would transition, whereas I've often seen some people sort of saying, oh, so if you're transitioning to be a woman but you like women, why would you transition? It's like, well, because they're two separate things. It just shows that there's a misunderstanding of the reason of transition. So I think especially for trans people who are perhaps gender non-conforming even in their new kind of gender or new perceived gender, I think really like hitting that point home of like it's my own gender identity, it's separate from who I like, it's separate from my hobbies or even though I present myself in some situations. But that's a really important thing I think to get, and once you get that, I think that's the biggest hurdle I think overcome.
Just to add on, Claudia, that was a great point. I think to add on to what cisgender siblings could do to better support their trans siblings is also when they come out, not to assume that they would fully fit into kind of the stereotypes that you were referring to. Because, a trans woman might not like makeup, like that's not quite my thing, or they might not want to, wear a dress. And I think it's definitely important to, like I was mentioning, to ask questions to kind of, because obviously their interest or expression will probably change, but it's definitely good to understand that so you're not kind of overreaching.
Totally agree with all of that. That was a really good point, and I got caught up in it, and I had one thing I wanted to add to that, but I have ADHD. So, oh, right, yes, actually kind of related to that. If you are a sibling, I think, to a transgender person, and I think both of you can maybe attest to this a little bit. If you are a sibling to somebody who just came out, you may be thrust into somewhat of a teaching role, a little bit, which is kind of this balance between like, we're not trying to teach our sibling gender stereotypes, but also, and I mean, gosh, my experience as a trans woman, I came out, kind of late, was like, I had a lot of issues around my own personal safety and making bad choices that my sister kind of had to step in and be like, you are a woman. People see you as a woman. You cannot keep doing this. Just an example of her stepping in. I was talking to her about a guy. And this guy had suggested that I should come over to his place for a drink. And I was like, oh, it sounds like a lovely idea. And she was like, no, like you take someone with you. um, and I was like, what? Why? And then it like dawned on me, like why? But like I think it's really important to remember that we weren't socialized um, in our gender, especially early on when a lot of those important lessons were imbued. And so it's really helpful, I think, for siblings to kind of like be our guide a little as we're like growing into our genders. Did
I
you
that
experience
actually,
that at all?
sorry, I wasn't trying to me or
But either of you, go ahead. You had a point.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to add on to that. I experienced it a little bit. My sister was definitely a good support, teaching me. Like for example, when we first went to the mall, I didn't even
Mm-hmm.
know like what my size was in women's, and I hadn't really had my style fully fleshed out yet. So she was definitely a great help in those more, I'd say, obvious areas, especially
Mm-hmm.
areas that I was able to recognize. But just to add to that good point, sometimes trans siblings won't quite know because we weren't socialized in the gender we identify as. So of course we're going to know some more obvious things, but there's some more not obvious things that we might not be acquainted with. For example, I never really learned how to braid my hair, and that's just never something that people really thought about. Even my sister, who's super supportive. So I think
Mm,
definitely asking and being like, hey, would you want me to show you this, would be helpful.
absolutely. And we are getting close to time. And like I just want to kind of like take a feel here. Are you all wanting to maybe go through some more points, or do you like I know some of you have places to be, so I just want to do a quick gut check on if we should start kind of like ramping down.
I mean, I'm happy for another half an hour at most, on my side.
Okay, Lily.
Yeah, as long as I don't have dinner too late.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't want you to go hungry. Um, yeah, yeah. So I think um, I just want to like go through my points here because I kind of put them out of order because we were running close to time. Let's see. If you were going, okay. Um, hmm. One of these questions I have here is: do you think it matters if you're a trans person? And I can only speak from my perspective. Do you think you being a younger sibling or an older sibling sort of impacted your relationship with your cisgender siblings?
I think, yeah, in my situation, I think it did, because I guess my sister sees herself as a bigger sister and kind of looks after me, so the kind of protective element.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think, but I think also there was an obstacle in the sense of, I think I mentioned before in terms of confusing it with gay and that kind of thing, and the fact that she was older, she kind of felt she knew better than I did. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so sometimes, I guess, like you mentioned that, being trans, you're in a teaching role, but if you're the younger sibling, sometimes it could be the situation that the older sibling might think they know better, and they think, well, no, actually, that's not the case. I know because I've had like this or this experience or whatever, and that could potentially be an obstacle. But at the same time, it could also be an interesting way to kind of shift the dynamic to, to actually have a situation where you can teach them about something and perhaps establish a slightly different dynamic of beyond, the older sibling knowing more than you. And I guess it
Mm-hmm.
depends at the age you come out. I mean, because I was 18, she was then 22. So I think there's quite a big difference between 18 and 22. Whereas if you're, I
Sure.
guess, like in your 50s, like your sibling's 54, it's probably not much different. Um,
Right. Right.
but yeah, I think there is a different dynamic there in
Sure.
terms of the older. I guess if they're younger, perhaps I would maybe guess that they're maybe more likely to kind of just take on what you're saying because you're kind of older than them. I'd be interested to hear your story, Evie, actually, about like because you're the oldest sibling, like how your younger siblings took it and whether they kind of them being younger helped them take it on board or maybe it didn't. Yeah.
Yeah. Lily, were you the younger or older sibling or middle?
So I'm the baby. I'm the youngest sibling.
Oh
Um,
my.
yeah, like I've. That's a good question. I've never actually considered it, but I would definitely say me being the younger sibling has affected it. Like I said, she was begging for a baby sister when I was born,
Right.
and
Right.
now it's kind of come into like a guidance role. sort of like, she wants to protect me as the older sibling. She wants to make sure I learn all these new things and, hang out with good people and have good style. I think that's definitely affected it. I'd say for the better, for my sake, just based on what I needed, especially right after I came out, to have that kind of protective guiding role. I'd definitely be interested to hear your story, Evie, especially of the oldest of, you said 6?
Yeah.
I'm the eldest of 6, so I have 5 siblings. Yeah. So I grew up with one very abusive parent, and as a consequence, 2 of my siblings are sort of lost to me. That has nothing to do with my transness. It's just that connection was severed, and there was nothing I could really do about it. They're getting older. They're starting to turn 18, and I'm going to be able to contact them. But I'm a good bit older than my siblings, by a fair margin, except for one. I actually, small anecdote, had like the bitterest relationship with my little sister when I was younger, with the eldest of my siblings, because she took my name. Because I knew what my name was supposed to be if I had been born as a girl. And I was supposed to be born as a girl. I was carried like a girl. That's what my mom said, is that I was being carried as a girl. They couldn't tell that I was a boy, was surprising to them. So the name I was supposed to have wound up with my sister, and I felt bitter about that for years. That's a little aside. But with my 2 closest siblings, just like relationship-wise, with my brother, I think he did feel a sense of loss, in sort of like losing an older brother role, somebody who had been like giving him guidance and support, and affirmation, in that way, the way brothers do. My younger sister was like, "Oh, thank God, because I can't talk to like my other older sister about anything girly." Like, I'm from West Virginia again. Like my closest sister is not at all a very feminine person. I think I've seen her wear makeup on like a few times, like I can count them on one hand. A lot of camo and punk rock going on there. But yeah, so like she was like, "Oh, thank God, finally I have someone to talk to about this stuff," and that really helped us bond. So it was weird. We sort of like traded off. She was like guiding me in woman things, and like womanhood, and keeping me up on like, no, we don't do that anymore, or we do this. And also I was like being the older sister for her, and being a support she hadn't had. So it was like 2 very different reactions. And I think my brother is still sort of smarting a little. Our relationship is definitely less strong than it was. Like it's strong. I feel secure in my brother's love. But it's not like it was, and I think part of that is that I'm not a big brother anymore. And and I think there is a sense of loss there, and I think we're still working through that together. But I don't get that he's grieving or angry. I think he's just trying to figure out where I fit. So yeah, I mean, I think being the eldest was strange because I had a very paternal role with all of my siblings, just by being so much older than them. So I was their guide for a lot of things. Yeah, but
The
I
way,
think mm-hmm.
go ahead.
No, go on, please.
You sure? Okay. I was just going to say the way you were describing how your brother reacted was actually, I have a younger sibling, much younger, and he's an only child, adopted, and he sees me kind of as a older, or he saw me at the very least, as like an
Mm-hmm.
older brother, very guiding, like cool kid, what he wanted to be when he grew up. And I don't think he knows yet because he's a little bit of extended family. And I'm very afraid that that's kind of the reaction he's going to have, where even if he's
Yeah.
supportive and at some point understanding, at the very least, he's almost going to feel like he lost a part of his childhood because we interacted a lot when he was very young.
And I think that's worth bringing up. But let's talk about memories. Um, inside of family, memories are very important. And I'm actually glad you said that. I had it in my notes and I needed a good segue. So thank you for handing me that slow ball. But yeah, memories are so important. And there's all of these photographs of you and your siblings. There are all these important touchstones and moments where there are things my sister or my brother want to talk about or to show photos of, trips we took, um, events that happened in our family. And their respect for me does put a weird relationship on their ability to communicate those memories and sort of like how they have to go back and revisit them. And I think it is worth noting that, like, when we transition, I feel like, and maybe you all can agree, like the family has to transition too. Um, and some of that process can be kind of painful. Um, I've definitely had conversations with my siblings like, okay, but when I'm talking about growing up, how do I talk about you? Can I show people this photo I really love of us? Um, do you have any kind of like thoughts or events or feelings around that?
Yeah, I think for me it's kind of interesting that, I guess, because when I came out, there wasn't any kind of social media, I think. So in terms of kind of photos, I think the only kind of photos we have are kind of our personal, like, family photo albums.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been quite fortunate in that sense of not having to kind of encounter that kind of issue of, sort of showing like photos or having photos, or whether, like, I can be tagged in a photo, for example, or things like that.
Sure.
Um, but I think when you mentioned memories, I think it is a very important, a significant part of transition, which can be both, I guess, an important part of your life, but also something that can produce more difficulty, because I find that even if you kind of establish a new dynamic with other people in your life, and especially with people
Mm-hmm.
who haven't met you before, as you were previously known, you can very much start to build an identity, as your true self. But within your family, I think that takes a lot longer. And I think sometimes that dynamic of you previously having been the son or the brother or whatever, that can kind of remain, and it can make family sort of gatherings more difficult. I find in
Sure.
certain situations I kind of find myself changing. I remember in the beginning, my voice kind of got a bit deeper because I was used to being in that kind of situation, and it
Right.
I kind of felt like, I think for a while I did distance myself from my family, because I kind of felt I had to distance myself from that role, from that kind of that world, I guess. Um, and so it took, I guess, quite a few years, I think, for me to kind of, for myself to really reestablish myself and actually be in a situation where I could be, like, just, as a daughter, and not be kind of reminded of that kind of dynamic of, being the son or the brother. And I think, I guess for me, I don't know whether it was just as time passed, or whether it was something that kind of hit home for them. But it's when I had my final surgery, my, like, reassignment surgery. I think
Mm-hmm.
from that point on, that just kind of felt it. I just kind of felt a shift where, like, the son, the brother, had completely now gone, and, like, from then on, I kind of felt like a kind of new dynamic had been established, and it was established in a way where, I was still the same person, but the gender had shifted, and it's kind of difficult to kind of put my exact finger on it, but that's how it's kind of changed.
Right.
Um, and I think, yeah, with my sister as well, I think it probably took, like, those few years, I guess, to kind of shift that dynamic, and also shift the kind of the way, like you mentioned, the way of talking about somebody. So I think in the beginning she kind of
Yeah.
still sort of, even when she kind of accepted who I was, it was kind of, but I still used to be a boy, sort of thing. Whereas
Right.
now it's kind of talking about me in the past. It's, it's all she and her, and it's almost, I think, like I mentioned previously, it's almost it now is in a situation where it almost feels weird to even think of me as how I was before. Um,
Right.
and yeah, but I guess, yeah, because it's been like 14, 15 years now, so it's kind of almost like that dynamic really has established itself over those years. Yeah. And it
Yeah.
has changed over time, even during that time. Yeah.
What about you, Lily?
Yeah, I actually wanted to build on what you were saying, Claudia. It's almost like there's a like battle between understanding and accepting both you and your family that you really were always female or male,
Yeah.
respectively.
Hmm.
But also having this like desire to really separate almost a breaking point from when you came out, the time after that and the time before that. I think that's a little bit stronger for me and certain people, just because there's like amounts of trauma surrounding it. And
Sure.
then I had a similar experience where I really felt the need to kind of distance myself, whether intentionally or unintentionally, from my extended family, grandparents, uncles. And it's only been recent that I've kind of come back to them. And I think they see a much bigger difference, both that I've kind of fallen into my identity better, but also, physical changes just being on hormones. Um, so it's taken a little bit of an more extended amount of time for them to kind of, use the correct pronouns, understand things. Um, but I think it's kind of a journey to really discover how much you want to kind of shove aside and be like, oh, that was almost a past life, and how much you want
Right.
to bridge the gap and understand that, you really were always who you are. Now you're just representing that better. I
Okay.
don't remember what the original question was. Sorry, I just wanted to build on that.
Oh, it's just no, it's really good. I was talking about like those memories and our relationships to them. I think we're now in the last 10 minutes. So I'm gonna ask one final question. And I'm super. Um, I like to end things by talking about the future. And so for both of you, I think the thing I would like to hear, and I hope that everyone is going to really take away something from, where do you want to grow your relationship with your siblings? What's next? What would bring you closer? What is something you want to do with them? Like where, in a year, 2 years, 5 years, um, what does that relationship look like if in an idealized world? You can talk about what you think would be different or whatever comes to mind for you. Lily, would you like to go first on that one?
Oh, sure.
I mean, no pressure. I'm just offering.
No, you're good. I didn't want to jump in.
Mhm.
I'd say uh, with my sibling specifically, with my eldest sibling, who we've kind of fallen out a little bit, I am slowly coming to terms, especially as I've gone through therapy and really processed both my trauma and like my identity. Um, I've really had the desire to reconnect with her, both in general, but also to sit down and have a very serious conversation and to tell her that, the last time we really spoke, you really ingrained in my head that you weren't there for me and that you didn't want to support me, and you thought this was a bad thing when she said, when she was crying and said, please don't do this after I came out. And I really want to
Yeah.
kind of make her understand that like this is what it is. If you have any desire to be a good sibling, you really have to step up and learn at least a little bit, to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
As far as my other sister Liz, I feel like recently my situation has improved drastically since the being kicked out of the home, which I'm
Of
very
course.
grateful for.
I'm so
But it's
happy to hear that.
But it's also allowed us to come together almost as young adults. Obviously, she's still the older sibling with more life experience.
Of course.
But we've, sat down, cooked dinner together, had wine or sparkling
Mhm.
water, and really had these bonding, like young woman moments as sisters. Almost
Mhm.
these mundane moments that I wouldn't really search for if I was trying to like categorize good trans sibling experiences, but just ones that came across naturally. And I think that's only going to progress in the next, 5, 10 years. I would love for her to be there when, I get engaged to or get married and be able to share that in a very
Mhm.
sisterly way, to have her there, be the first one I
Yeah.
text, first one to send the picture to. And I think that's going to happen, and I'm really happy.
And what about you, Claudia?
was saying actually what Lily mentioned at the end there kind of links exactly to what I was going to say. So that's quite good sort of a shift into my point in terms of as I mentioned before, like at the very beginning. So I'm living with my partner now in Japan. So in terms, obviously, with my sister, she's in the UK, so we're kind of long distance in that sense. But obviously with my partner here, we're kind of, we're starting our own type of family. And so for my sister to be part of that and to affirm that and to celebrate our, sort of marriage, which hopefully will happen in the near future, I think is going to be something that's going to be really affirming. I think, with her being part of
Yeah.
my sort of new family as well, and being and a sort of significant part of that will be something that
Yeah.
I'll be looking forward to in terms of our relationship, especially like I can imagine for a lot of trans people, I don't know whether it's the case for both of you, but for me, thinking of marriage or thinking of relationships was, it was unthinkable, even sort of 5 or 10 years ago.
Oh yeah.
To be in that situation, to
Definitely.
think that anyone would accept it, or and I even thought separate to being, or perhaps it was to do with being trans, but to me it kind of felt even separate from being trans. I just felt like I wasn't somebody who attracted people, or somebody who I felt like I was a good person, but I didn't feel like I was somebody who attracted people. I just felt like I had something missing, and so to finally get to a point where I can think about marriage or think about these kind of things, and then to have my family share in that and to kind of show that to my family is something that feels really special. Yeah.
It's so funny, the thing you like, it's not funny, humorous, but like the irony is not lost on me that I think we all had that sort of like,
Yeah.
okay, but who's gonna love me?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I transition, like who will want to be with me? The irony there, in my case, is that I went from like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna be unlovable, I'm gonna be alone. I don't know if these were thoughts that went through your heads.
Oh yeah.
But like I'm polyamorous. I have 3 amazing partners. They are just the most beautiful people. 2 of them are women, 1 is agender. Um, and it's just been incredible in that way. And also to like introduce my siblings to them, or hope to. Um, I think if I'm going to look into the future 5 years, it's sort of the same thing for me, which is like I want my little sister to be my maid of honor sometime in the next 5 years, I want to make my little brother an uncle. Like I want to have children. I want to be married. I want to have a family, like start a family um, with my partners in whatever form that takes. And so I think over the next few years, like, I mean, there's a lot of work on me I want to do. And I think as I do that work on me, my relationships with them will change. Um, and grow. We're growing closer, not further apart. Um, but gosh, I really do want to be hosting them for holidays. Um, when I think about the future, my future relationship with them, I really hope my bond with my brother gets a little stronger. Um, I don't know what that looks like, but I feel like that's been really like tumultuous, and I hope like not bad, but just like there's a lot of uncertainty there that I think we need to work on together. He's a really good man, so I'm sure we will. Um, yeah. So with that said, I'd like to do some wrapping up stuff in the last 5 minutes. Do you all have any like last things that you would love to say to the audience, or a thing that you would say to your sibling if they were watching? Um, really, any last things that you would like to say before we end?
Just on the note of y'all both mentioning kind of, marriage and kind of creating your own, like a new family with your partner.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'd say to my sister, she's actually watching, hi Liz,
Mm-hmm.
is
Hello,
it's
Liz.
been wonderful. It's been wonderful to, since my relationship with my parents has really fallen out and basically non-existent. It's
Yeah.
been really wonderful to almost have in-laws of my own for my partner, meeting her parents, and everything was great, but then it would have been a lot more hurtful if I didn't even have that sibling support. And it's nice that my sister has basically taken up that role.
Yeah.
So while I'm building a new family, she can, be a part of that. It's very nice.
What about you, Claudia? Last things you'd like to get out?
Yeah, just one thing I'd like to mention about how supportive my sister was. I think when I had my gender reassignment surgery, it was I guess it was tough. I guess physically getting through it. There were some complications and bleeding and things like that, and it was a very I guess mentally it was it was great. As soon as I woke up, I felt amazing. But in terms of the kind of physical side, it was physically traumatic.
Yeah.
Being in hospital, not being able to sleep, being very alone,
Yeah.
having blood transfusions. It was a difficult time. But during that time, the person who called me the most, or was in contact with me the most, was my sister. I think every day, every morning, she kind of called to say how I was, and that was something that really calmed me
I
down
love
and
that.
through that situation. I think even though that was now 9 years ago, that's something I'll never forget.
Yeah, I think we never forget who's there for us when it's rough times.
Yeah.
I think if my siblings were watching right now, I would say to all of them, all 5 of them, that they are my world and I love them so much. And I am so grateful to have them in my life and for the changes that they've made with me. They could have really dug in. They could have left me alone, and they didn't. And I think that says a lot about their character. And it's the way they've treated me has made me proud of them. And so I would love for them to know that if they were watching this. Yeah. I do need to wrap up with a couple of small business items. So, as I said at the beginning, this whole stream is like provided for and covered by the Trans Empowerment Project, which you can go to transempowerment.org and see everything that's going on there on their website, lovely website, and just a lovely organization. They've had like 15 people apply for food and housing assistance in the last 2 days, which is that's not a small thing to help somebody find housing, to help somebody with their food needs. Trans people endure astounding levels of joblessness and homelessness. And that brings us to just astounding levels of mental health problems that come with that sort of thing, right? So it's really important that as a trans family and as a just and equitable and good society, that we're providing that support. The Trans Empowerment Project is helping to do that, but they need help too. So if you are watching this, I would love for you to go to transempowerment.org or transempowermentproject.org and to donate what you can, provide assistance where you can. If volunteering is the thing that speaks out to you, there are ways to do that. There are ways to help. But financial assistance is kind of the most urgent need to help get trans people housing and food security. Oh, I'm sorry, it was transempowerment.org. Sorry. Just to wrap everything up. Lily, you have been amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Claudia,
you've been incredible. It's been a joy talking to you.
Yeah, and you, and so likewise.
I know it's a very early hour for you there in Japan, so
Very different.
I really appreciate you. Yeah, I love that you took the time out and made sort of like special time for this.
Yeah, I really want
again. Again, I'm Evey Winters. I have been the host and moderator, so I hope you've enjoyed this talk. I have my own website at eveywinters.com. And again, I run with some other people a trans education group. I'm sure there'll be a link available in some descriptions after we post this and it's all edited up. Thank you all so much. Yeah, you had one thing?
Yeah, if you didn't mind, I was just going to add a personal anecdote.
Go for it.
Thanks to when I was kind of couch hopping after some traumatic events in my family and got kicked out, organizations just like Trans Empowerment Project really helped me out and really made that difference. So thanks to them for what they're doing. The more organizations like this, the better. And I'll definitely be making another donation today.
I love that. That's so amazing. All right. Thank you both so much for being here and for talking to me. It's been a lovely time. I hope I'm going to hear from you more. Either in my advocacy work or just personally. You're welcome to message me anytime.
Yeah, well, thank you.
All right. Now, this is a personal thing that I do whenever I'm on a live stream and I'm ending. I'm a Buddhist. I always like to end by giving a bit of a blessing and with a Pali word from my religion, which is metta. And metta means loving kindness. And it's my wish for everybody who's watching this and who can be impacted by this talk and by interfacing with trans folk. So may you be well, happy, and peaceful. And I hope you have a wonderful evening, or in your case, a wonderful day, Claudia. And have a really, thank you so much for being here. And I hope the rest of your year, I hope the rest of your year is fulfilling. 2020's been a lot. All right. Have a good night. I'm going to end.